Now entering Nerdist.com.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, Episode 27, The Alternative Factor.
It's that time again where we open up the corridor between this universe and another. On Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, I'm John, Head Wound Champion.
I'm Ken, Head Wound Ray.
And I'm John, Non-Head Wound Champion.
And I'm Ken, Non-Head Wound Ray.
Oh God, I'm so confused already. I'm going to be up front here. You, dear audience, you may wish for a universal escape hatch after this week's episode.
Dude, really?
What? Yeah, I just gave it up. Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
I just gave it up.
Well, because they're so cool. Maybe that's why. Maybe you didn't spoil anything. Maybe because having a universal escape hatch would be awesome.
Right.
Having a place that you go hang out between universes. You know, you get a little rundown, but you don't want to be completely negative. So instead, you just go hang out in the hallway for a while.
Right. Oh, yeah. Or eternity.
Maybe forever. Yeah, a while. Well, eternity is a while, and then some, I guess.
Well, friends, if you don't know what you've tuned into, it is Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, where Ken and I get to delve into the morals, meanings, and messages of Star Trek. And this week, we are talking about the alternative factor in which universes collide. The good universe, the bad universe.
No, they don't collide. If they had collided, did you not even watch the episode?
I tried to tune it out.
It's where universes sort of bump. Well, I don't want to say that.
Well, dudes collide. Dudes from two different universes collide.
Yes, but thankfully neither one is in the universe at the time.
God, I'm already confused again.
Yeah, well, your confusion, my friend, is trivial, as is your Star Trek trivia. Please hit it for me.
Here we go. All right. The trivia to do with the alternative factor really comes down to one big fat piece of trivia. It's so big, in fact, that I don't even think we can call it trivial. The character of Lazarus was originally cast with John Drew Barrymore. And John Drew Barrymore, not to be confused with John Barrymore the Elder, we are talking about John's son, who is the father of actress Drew Barrymore. All right. So he was cast in this role to play Lazarus. And everything was right. He'd been fit for the costume. He got his script. Contracts were signed. Everything was good to go. And the day shooting was to begin, he didn't show up. So a flurry of phone calls were made. Agent, manager, his home, and he was MIA, totally gone. So at the last minute, the role had to be recast. But here's what I love about this. Pretty much everybody from the production team at Star Trek decided, we're not going to let this fly. We're going to go back to the union, and we're going to lodge a formal complaint, and we're going to take this to arbitration. And what happened was the union bosses, and actually on that panel were Charlton Heston, Carl Malden, who was the president of the Actors Union at the time. They agreed with the production staff at Star Trek, and John Drew Barrymore's union card was suspended for 6 months. Guy couldn't work for 6 months after that. And I think what's interesting about that is that on some level, this is this little science fiction show saying, we're not going to be the little science fiction show that gets jerked around by a big famous actor. And believe it, that after that point, there is no point in Star Trek's history where a guest star did not show up. So I think that's kind of a neat story about this episode. The other thing that's neat about it is that you have to wonder, I mean, we've kind of given up already what we thought about the episode.
Oh, you've given up what you thought about it.
Well, but you have to wonder if the show would have been improved, certainly different, had an actor of his caliber, of John Barrymore's character, played this role instead. little bit more trivia to look into here. Hey, we're back at Vasquez Rocks. Hope you enjoy Vasquez Rocks because you see a lot of it in Star Trek.
Always a good time when you're at Vasquez Rocks. Well,
I know.
Well, you think not, apparently.
No, well, see, I would just be wandering around looking at the rocks.
Yeah.
You know. But hey, Ken, have you ever heard of the Trifid Nebula?
I have not.
Well, it's funny because you have just seen a whole hell of a lot of it in this episode. Every time we flash from the universe winking out, as Spock describes it, and we see that little bit of starscape superimposed on the regular image, that is in fact the Trifid Nebula. It was rephotographed later by Hubble. It's a beautiful nebula. So if you like nebulas, you get a whole lot of that particular one in this episode.
I did not know that.
Well, now you do. Not to be confused with Day of the Triffids, by the way, which I mentioned in the episode This Side of Paradise.
Nor should it be confused with the Horsehead Nebula.
No, not at all.
There are plenty of things to not confuse the Trifid Nebula with.
Right. But if you have a favorite nebula already, I'm just saying, look into the Trifid Nebula, okay?
If you have a favorite nebula, by the way, don't write to us about it. we don't want to fight. We don't want to fight about which is the best nebula. Are we in one? We're not, are we?
No, we're not.
That's too bad. If we were, I would say we really just have to stick with our own. But we're in a stupid galaxy.
Yeah.
Right.
And one last little bit of trivia here. We're going to talk more about the character of Lieutenant Masters, Lieutenant Charlene Masters. And she's a guest character in this episode, but the script actually called for a lot more from her. And that got cut out from the first draft. And there are a lot of speculative reasons about why that got cut out. The character was not written with any particular race in mind. They cast a black woman in that role, and there's some people speculate that, well, having another black actress on the show who has a bigger part and then has a relationship with the guest star who is played by a white man, that wouldn't fly in some of the southern states. There's not really good evidence to support that that's why it got cut out. This could just be an example of the script getting cut because the script got cut. But we can revisit more of Lieutenant Masters when we get into the rest of the episode.
Positive, negative, matter, antimatter. What are the matters in the alternative factor?
Prologue. The Enterprise is orbiting a lifeless, nondescript planet. Nothing to it. We'll take a few pictures, then off to Starbase 200. Suddenly the ship is rocked. Then the ship is rocked again. Spock says both times the Enterprise was rocking, everything was on the verge of winking out. His words, not mine. Everything was close to non-existence. Also, there's a human-seeming life sign on the planet now. Kirk and Spock and a crew of red shirts go to investigate as we go to the opening credits. Act 1. Kirk says the whole region of space felt the violent winking. Planet-side, they find a one-man ship, as well as a blue-clad, goateed guy high atop the rocks. He calls out to them. He's glad to see them. He's saying there's still time. They can stop someone. Then he falls unconscious. We'll see him later in sickbay. Back aboard the Enterprise, Lieutenant Masters tells Kirk that whatever caused the winking also drained the dilithium crystals. It'll take a while for them to re-amplify. Then Uhura gets a notification for Kirk. Stand by for an important message from Starfleet. Code 1, which indicates an invasion of some sort. Commodore, no name needed, contacts the Enterprise, saying that the violent winking felt by the Enterprise was actually felt throughout the galaxy and beyond, though it was strongest on the planet the Enterprise is orbiting. The Enterprise crew needs to investigate whether it's a natural phenomenon or prelude to invasion, and they'll be doing that alone since Commodore No Name is ordering every other ship out of the sector. Mission laid out, Kirk sends Spock back to check out the planet while he goes to talk to the guy with the goatee. Lazarus is his name. He tells Kirk that he's pursuing a thing, the devil's own spawn, something that destroyed his entire civilization. He's death, anti-life, lives to destroy. Sounds like bad news. Kirk decides he and Lazarus will go planetside to check out his story. There, they catch up with Spock, who says he's found nothing more. Also, he's heard this story about this thing that Lazarus says he's chasing, but he can find no evidence of it whatsoever, and so he deems Lazarus a liar. To his face. Suddenly, violent winking. Lazarus runs off, ranting about chasing and killing his enemy. Then he goes visibly negative, like looking through a film negative. And he fights something human-looking, though still in negative land. Then he's back. Then he falls unconscious. Falling's kind of his thing. He comes to, saying he's seen his enemy again, and they have to kill it. Kill, kill, kill. After these messages. Act 2. Lazarus is back in sickbay, this time with a bandage on a head wound. Spock can't say what's going on with all the violent winking. He's had a hard time believing that Lazarus's enemy is causing it, though the times do line up. Dr. McCoy, meanwhile, has a mystery of his own. Lazarus' head wound is totally gone. And so is Lazarus, but no one seems concerned about that right now. Lazarus, without the head wound, is hanging out in the break room. You know, just hanging. Until he hears Lieutenant Masters and her assistant talking about the re-amplified dilithium crystals. And out he goes after them. But, oh no! Violent winking, negative land fighting. And after that, head wound Lazarus standing where non-head wound Lazarus had been. That's when Kirk and McCoy happen upon him. Bones is startled by the reappearance of the head wound, though Kirk is just annoyed, assuming that Bones was either mistaken or pulling his leg. Spock calls Kirk to the bridge, and Kirk takes Lazarus with him. On screen, a visible source of radiation on the planet. Visible, but undetectable by sensors. It doesn't exist, at least not normally, though Spock says it may be a rip in space and time. He was able to spot it using the dilithium crystals. This is the first that non-head wound Lazarus has heard of those, and he needs them, he says, to get his enemy. No, says Kirk, since he needs them for the Enterprise. Lazarus then makes some threats that he says are not threats, and leaves the bridge under no guard. Violent winking, negative land fighting, non-head wound Lazarus emerges. He finds engineering and thus the dilithium crystals. He knocks out Masters and her assistant, though in a way that lets Kirk know that something is up. Uhura says security says Lazarus is missing, and we go to commercial. Act 3. 2 of the dilithium crystals are missing, and Kirk is interrogating Lazarus, now with head wound. Lazarus says it wasn't him, but his enemy that stole them. He wants them for the same reason Lazarus does, to kill his enemy, which is him. Kirk has Spock organize a search party. They and he and Lazarus will check stuff out planetside. Again. Down below, they all fan out and search. Violent winking, negative land fighting, head wound Lazarus emerges and starts climbing down a high rock formation atop which he stands. His climbing dislodges a boulder that nearly kills Kirk. In fact, it would have killed him had Lazarus not warned him. Then, head wound Lazarus falls off the rocks. Falling's kind of his thing. He wakes up in sickbay. Again, still ranting about the thing. Kirk thanks Lazarus for saving his life, but he has some questions. Turns out Lazarus was lying earlier. Maybe not about his enemy, but about where he was from. There's no there where he says there was. Never has been. Yes, I lied, but you wouldn't have believed me. Truth is, the planet below was my home. My enemy destroyed it. My ship is a time chamber. I'm a time traveler. So's my enemy. May I please have some dilithium crystals to deal with him? Bones demands that Kirk give the severely injured Lazarus time to rest. And could you please get your security guard out of here too? It's not like Lazarus is going anywhere. Except, of course, he does. Spock, meanwhile, is still puzzling over the radiation on the planet that you can see, but that you can't pick up on sensors. Their sensors, you see, are designed to find anything, anywhere in the universe. But they can't find this. So it must be from outside their universe. A parallel universe, maybe. One that Kirk deems a negative to their own. A hole between the two might read as an invasion, as Starfleet had feared, since such a hole would not only let things out, but also let things in. Also, Lazarus seems like 2 men. One serene, one rambunctious, one with a head wound, one without. The Lazari may not have a purpose, but Spock fears their goals. He wants them contained, maybe even destroyed, because these 2 crazy kids get together, this universe gets destroyed. Everything gets destroyed. Head wound, meanwhile, causes a malfunction in engineering that literally smokes Masters and her assistant out of engineering. He sneaks in, steals the crystals, knocks out the transporter dude, and beams himself down to the planet. Kirk is only a moment behind and orders Spock to gather some red shirts and follow as soon as he can. On the planet, head wound Lazarus is outfitting his time ship with the crystals. Kirk lunges at him and disappears. Act 4. Kirk has gone negative, ending up in the alternative universe. Or he's gone alternative, ending up in the negative universe. Either way, he gets to spend time with non-head wound Lazarus. He's a calmer fellow, and he walks Kirk through what's happening. Yes, this is a parallel universe with antimatter instead of matter. Yes, if he and head wound got together any place but the anomaly that links the two universes, both universes would be destroyed. But he does have a plan. Kirk should go back to his positive universe, force head wound Lazarus into the hole. Non-head wound will be there too. Kirk should then completely destroy the time ship, trapping both Lazari in combat forever between the universes, and thus saving both universes. Kirk does all of this and saves his dilithium crystals too. The end.
Oh, I'm exhausted and I have a headache. Starbase 200.
I know, right?
It's an ironic name.
Why
it's
is that?
like it's Starbase 2, and they're like more like 200. You know,
well,
it's just to throw people off.
It is weird that we had Starbase 11 and Starbase 12. I think those are the only two starbases that we've had mentioned to this point. And I'm not 100% certain on that, but I'm fairly certain. We've actually made 2 visits to Starbase 11, and now all of a sudden it's Starbase 200.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy.
I've
Also,
been very busy in the last few weeks.
I don't know if Kirk remembers how hip and, dare I say, groovy Spock got with poetry in Devil in the Dark.
Who could forget?
But, you know, when Spock says that, you know, the whole universe seemed to wink out, Kirk says, I want analysis, not poetry. What poem? You know, what time did Wee Willie Winky run through the town? I guess, maybe that one, maybe that poem includes the word. No, it's just not even poetry. I don't get it. I don't get why he got so mad about that. Well, I get why he got so mad about it. Wink out is not a scientific term.
No.
But it's not a poetic term either.
No.
Yeah.
It's none of the above. Because, you know, speaking of science, I mean, first of all, we could have on every scientific guest star on our podcast to try to make sense out of this, and it still wouldn't make sense. So I just think that I don't even want to try to justify any of the science that's happening here. But I will say that for anyone who sort of poo-poos any modern renditions of Star Trek for bad science, just start here. You know, you can go back and you look at the original series, and if you can make sense out of this, I'm sure it would involve, you know, flowcharts and graphs and all. I go to it because I'm lost.
Well, the one thing that I will say is I'm a huge fan of alternative universe stuff. By the way, and this will be something that we may want to revisit in season 2. Mm-hmm. Is it like a law that you have to have a goatee if you're from an alternate universe?
Yes, it is.
All right, just checking. Makes me wonder what I've been doing my whole life, because I've had one for the past, you know, close to 15 years, maybe a little bit more.
So I'm doing this show with the wrong Ken.
I don't know. I'm just saying, you know, if that's the sign, I seem to be wearing it.
Got it. But hey, you know, this is kind of an early piece of science fiction about a parallel universe.
Which I do like. Right. I mean, I love that. We didn't really get too much into it, but we did at least explore the idea, which is neat. I'm sorry, that's where I was going before I got sidetracked by my facial hair. Mm-hmm. I do love the fact that they're you know, sort of presenting that idea here.
Yeah, I don't know where the first time was in say modern science fiction that concept was really explored, but you just think about TV, kind of mid-century TV. This is the first example that I can think of, and it's, you know, it's cool that we're going there. Although I'm sure glad we got out of there. And speaking of parallel universes, things that aren't quite the same as our own universe, talk to me about engineering.
Yeah, what's up with that? We've been to engineering several times, including in an episode that we're going to revisit in a little bit that I can't think of the name of right this second.
Yeah,
totally spacing on it. Well, you could also tell me if you know it. The Enemy Within. Thank you very much. We've been to engineering a few times. That's where Kirk fought Khan in engineering. O'Reilly took over the entire starship by going to engineering. Logie Kirk tracked down Alt Kirk and the Enemy Within by knowing engineering like the back of his hand. So we've been to engineering a few times. Mm-hmm. Lazarus goes to engineering a few times in this episode, and they're not going to the same place. It's a much smaller room. It's just like a door in a corridor that's got like a nice, like a mid-1960s office sign, except it just says engineering.
Right.
And you go in, and I don't know if maybe, real engineering was down for cleaning, or maybe Scotty had it tied up with some other project. But yeah, we're in a much smaller place this week when we go to engineering.
Yeah. Well, I have a theory here.
Okay.
Because Scotty is nowhere to be seen in this episode.
No, he's not. Neither is Sulu.
Right, nor is Sulu. But I'm just going to assume that Scotty is away doing something. He's got kind of a long leave. He's been saving up his vacation hours, whatever. And it's kind of like when you leave for college and then you come back after a few months and then your parents have just thrown everything from the house into your now empty room. And I kind of feel that that's what happened with engineering here. Scotty was gone a little too long, and the rest of the departments kind of got together and they're like, look, we need the room. We're just going to throw all this stuff.
So he came back. He came back from his first semester, and engineering was a sewing room now.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And he was expected to sleep in the or work in the guest room, which has now been turned into engineering.
It's a really good thing that Captain Kirk is so good at his job, because here we have potentially catastrophe on a universal scale. Mm-hmm. And Starfleet Admiral No Name just says, hey, Kirk, you're on your own. Good luck.
Well, I mean, they were the ones orbiting the planet where it happened. It's curious, though, how they could know that it was felt throughout the whole galaxy and beyond.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, remember, those sensors can sense anything, anywhere, at any time.
In the universe.
Except for the things that cannot be sensed.
Right. In the whole universe. In the whole universe. Yeah, Spock is actually, just stymied that they can pick up anything in the whole universe, but they can't pick this up. I personally am stymied that they have a sensor that, that was a really good salesman. Mm-hmm. No, really, in the whole universe. Really in the whole yes, really in the whole universe. So, for example, right now it's sensing car keys that somebody lost 400 years ago. Wow, that is good. Now, can you show me where that is? You wouldn't understand, but buy 3.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a lot of, I know it's kind of our job to nitpick, but if you want to nitpick, there's a lot of stuff in here that doesn't work. Let's talk about something that does.
Good.
Lieutenant Masters.
Yes.
I will tell you that I like her for one reason specifically.
Okay.
We've had a multi-ethnic thing going on Star Trek for quite a while now. We've got Uhura, we've got Sulu. Oh, not in this episode, but we have Sulu. Mm-hmm. Spock. Back on Galileo 7, we had Boma, mm-hmm. who was a neat, strong African-American character. Generally speaking, and maybe this is Hollywood, maybe this is just easy casting, generally speaking, non-regulars tend to be white on Star Trek, and at least they have so far. Lieutenant Masters is African-American, or, she's black. I don't know what the proper term would have been then. I don't know what it is today, honestly, but she's not white. She is a woman. She's in science, and mm-hmm. she has at least a tiny bit of command. I mean, she's got a nameless assistant constantly in tow. Yeah. And that's neat to see. I bag on Star Trek quite a bit for not Star Trek specifically, but since we're doing a show specifically about Star Trek, I bag on Star Trek from time to time about sexism. And here we have something that's very much, not sexist, not racist, not classist. It's just, hey, here's the right person for the job. She happens to be a black woman, and it's not a big deal.
Oh, dude, I'm sorry. Is it okay if I take the wind out of your sails just a little bit?
Well, you can't, because I know what I saw, but go ahead.
Well, here's the thing. So I agree with you. I like the character very much, and for all the reasons you stated above. But here's the thing. That first draft of that script we pretty much have exactly the replay of the MacGyver's Khan relationship. Not the abusive aspect of it, but it's that Masters pretty much drops everything that she's doing because, be still my heart, a real honest-to-God manly man stepped onto the Enterprise. So she is going to stop everything else that she's doing and go throw herself at Lazarus.
Really?
And yeah.
Because he's like 8 kinds of crazy.
Oh, easy on a good day, on a good day. But so that little tinge is in there. But I'm glad that whole kind of subplot got cut out anyway.
Yeah, you see, that doesn't knock the wind out of my sails at all because it didn't happen. I mean, that somebody first wrote that, and then it ended up getting refined out. I mean, that's what first drafts are for, right?
Yeah. Well, good. Refill those sails and sail on. Hey, by the way, that corridor, I just wanted to point out, the magnetic antimatter warp corridor, I'm just throwing words out because that's what they do in this show as well.
Yeah.
Between universes, by the way, it is literally a corridor. I mean, we're talking about the two guys fighting in negative, and it's just kind of a corridor.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they could have been at a school or a library or a hospital just fighting in negative.
Well, I mean, you talked about the Trifid Nebula earlier, and I mean, we can talk about the fact that when they're on the planet and it gets the violent winking starts. There's wind and there's blurry shots and there's all this stuff. How would you, without spelling it out, how would you sort of have those visual cues, right? I mean, they chose to walk a fine line here of, we want to give some indication that something's happening, but we don't want to give the whole thing away right at the beginning. Because, I mean, while I was referring to them in the recap as, head wound Lazarus and not head wound Lazarus, it is not obvious when you're watching it that we're dealing with 2 different Lazari here.
Yeah. It's kind of helpful when you have the script as we do that we can reference, because it actually is Lazarus 1 and Lazarus 2. Look at it and go, oh, yeah, that's that guy. But, yeah, it's... I think part of the problem is that it's very repetitive as well. It's a lousy effect, but it's very repetitive, and then you mix that with a lot of wind and blurriness.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's just a lot kind of stacked against this episode.
Well, I mean, if we're going to be nice to it, they gave themselves a tough job. And if we're going to be honest, they didn't necessarily execute as well as they might have wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like the thing in 2001 where, we're going into the monolith and everything looks weird and trippy. It's just more like, oh, I can see where you'd want that to look weird and trippy, but it just looks kind of weird.
Right. Speaking of not executing well, Lazarus doesn't execute well the process of standing on things or climbing up things.
Falling is kind of his thing.
It is. I'm glad you pointed that out.
Totally. It actually made me laugh the 3rd time he fell. I was just like, wow, really? It's like, he's got 1 trick. Well, 2. He can go between universes, and he falls down a lot.
Apparently going between universes really messes with your equilibrium.
Well, it takes a toll,
It does.
Yeah. Especially if you're, 8 shades of crazy Lazarus. Serene Lazarus, I don't think fell down once. That's why that's how head wound Lazarus got his head wound. It wasn't in the fight.
Yeah.
It was in the falling and hitting rocks.
Right.
Because if there's a place you want to fall, Vasquez rocks ain't it. Because you know what Vasquez has? Rocks. And lots of them. Yeah. You're not going to hit the dirt. You're going to hit the rocks. I'm just thinking. I had a question for you about this episode. Is this the first time that we've seen dilithium crystals?
I believe it is. We've talked about them a lot.
Yeah, but I don't think we've ever seen them. We were at a mining colony that mined lithium crystals. We didn't even see those, but we get to see the dilithium crystals this time. I like them. They look like they look kind of like a cross between a frat house paddle and a dreidel.
Right.
But when they light up, they're really pretty things. They really are. They're very nice. And, how they actually power a ship, I don't know, but they are pretty.
So it's kind of weird. In that scene in Lazarus's time ship, interdimensional ship. By the way, he says, I'm a time traveler / I'm an interdimensional traveler. We don't know. He's all of that. He's good like that. But But yeah, in the ship where he's installed the dilithium crystal, it's kind of, I think it's cut down. Like they've shaved it down, they've shaped it to fit the way they want, and that's how you get that paddle / dreidel looking thing.
Yeah.
And when I first saw it, I was like, well, this is just like, it's a little polished piece of wood or something, but then it lit up.
Yeah.
And it is cool.
That's when it gets impressive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, we do have a math problem with the dilithium crystals.
Oh, no.
Well, we do.
Okay.
Serene, or non-head wound Lazarus, takes 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then head wound Lazarus takes 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kirk goes down and talks to non-head wound Lazarus, and they devise the plan. And then Kirk goes back through to our universe and pushes head wound Lazarus into the portal.
Right.
And then he takes the 2 dilithium crystals on this side. We're down 2 dilithium crystals.
Right. Oh, no.
Well, I mean, it's fine, because they get destroyed.
Yeah.
When they destroy the ship from orbit. It's just, I mean, we got a math problem there. I mean, we needed 4, but now we only need 2. Maybe you can double reamplify them.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I agree.
I don't know.
Yes.
That could be how it works.
By the way, if you have a doorway to a transdimensional corridor, do you want that in the entrance to your ship, or do you want that actually in the ship itself?
Well, the ship wasn't that big. It's a one-man ship.
But here's the thing. It looks like every time you get in and out of the ship, you're going to walk right past that transdimensional corridor door.
Well, if it's charged or turned on.
Yeah, that just seems like a bad location for it. That's all I'm saying. Like, I would want that in the corner somewhere where I don't accidentally stumble into it if it's on.
If you've been injured in multiple slip and fall incidents, call the team at Lazarus and Lazarus. Believe me, they've got the experience to understand.
You and I don't talk much about the show before we actually go to record the show.
Hardly ever.
Yeah, but occasionally we'll, say something to each other. You, for example, told me that I would have a new least favorite episode from the first season.
Yeah.
Now, it turns out you're wrong. I think I still, and I will be honest with you, I was looking forward to letting Miri off the hook.
Mm-hmm.
I actually like this episode still more than Miri. Now, that said, and I think I'm doing this out of order, but I will say this episode did not need to happen, I don't think, because this episode has already happened. And I mentioned it earlier. It's The Enemy Within. This, it feels to me, is The Enemy Within again. In that one, we had Alt Kirk and Logie Kirk kind of fighting for supremacy. Mm-hmm. In the end, it was decided that you couldn't have one without the other, that the two together made the whole, okay? In the alternative factor, we make the man with the good me, bad me, or the alt me, Logie me issue, Lazarus,
mm-hmm.
presenting a problem as old as man himself, which I think it could be why they have the Lazarus name, right? Because we got the whole duality of man thing again. I mean, we've got the good and evil, or the Logie and the alt. We've got this battle for supremacy between these two parties, which I mean goes back to. I mean, you could say it goes back to Cain and Abel, and certainly goes back before that. That's probably one of the earliest. Well, it's not even one of the earliest. What is it? It's the is it the Chinese creation myth that basically centers around the yin and yang? I mean, you've got them both. They both exist. I am whole except for one part that's missing. I am whole except for one part that's superfluous. Boom, the two of them get together and the universe is formed, right?
Yeah.
So it feels to me like, okay, so there's something kind of cute there using the Lazarus name, although it's not automatically seen. I think you sort of have to think, okay, well, why would they call him Lazarus? Oh, because we're dealing with something that, stretches back the ages.
Yeah.
And of course, Lazarus being the oldest living person, according to the Bible, I think, like 1,000.
Oh, no, I think that was Methuselah.
Oh, it was Methuselah. You're right. Who was
Lazarus? Was who Jesus brought back from the dead.
Oh, well, never mind then. Oh, wow, that's right. You're absolutely right. So why the name Lazarus?
What of Lazarus?
Oh, don't even do that. We'll do that at the end of the show.
Well, see,
wait. Here's the thing, though. Wait, let me go ahead and wrap up really quickly on that. So, so we end up with these two guys: the peaceful, dare we say, Logie Lazarus, or the more rambunctious, dare we say, alt Lazarus. Which one of these should survive? In the end, the answer is kind of neither or kind of both. I mean, one is not good and one is not evil, really, because to get rid of either one will destroy everything. Just like if we had sided with Logie Kirk instead of Alt Kirk, or Alt Kirk instead of Logie Kirk, we'd have ended up with no Kirk. Except this time we end up with no anything. We need both the more rambunctious, less thoughtful, got to get everything side, that dark part of ourselves we don't necessarily like, and the more contemplative, laid back, kind of cool Lazarus that we have too. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a universal truth. For the universe to continue, both sides, good and bad, have to exist on some level. But that was done much better in The Enemy Within.
Well, that's just it. I say, as I do so often on this show, Ken, I agree with you, but to an extent.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. It is done so much better in The Enemy Within. And I feel like, just an exploration of good side, bad side. That's what I'm really digging about all that we have watched in Star Trek so far. What we've seen so far is Star Trek not presenting a world where they say everything is perfect or humanity is perfect. We're just saying that we deal with and embrace and use the good parts of our nature and the bad parts of our nature to hopefully do something better. My problem with this, and using the Enemy Within analogy here, is that in this reality, in the reality of the alternative factor, these universes exist separately, and they never cross paths until you have this construct of the corridor and warp and magnetic and blah, 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 to bring those two sides together. So it's not a matter to me of Lazarus having a good side and a bad side. These are two sides that under any other circumstance would never come together. Whereas the fascinating thing to me about Kirk in The Enemy Within is that he's still the same guy in the same universe, and those two parts need to be together for him to be a whole person. If the universe is working correctly, according to the alternative factor, these two Lazari never meet. So they never have the opportunity to fight each other or even determine if one is good or bad. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I do see what you're saying, but I don't understand why. I don't understand why one completely unrealistic story about, good side versus evil side bothers you more than another completely unrealistic story about good side versus evil side. I mean, you're saying, well, because, it's one guy, but he's split in two now, but he's in the same universe, then I'm cool with it. But,
that's partly what I'm saying, yes.
Well, no, I understand that. I just can't figure out why exactly.
No, that is partly what I'm saying, because it is done more effectively in The Enemy Within.
Oh, it's done much more effectively in The Enemy Within. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is better. I will say this is better than Miri.
See, I disagree. I disagree so much.
I wanted to disagree, too. I wanted to not take that stance. I wanted to let Miri off the hook. Yeah. It just couldn't happen yet.
Miri, you are officially off the hook.
Nope. Anyway, though.
Right. But what I'm saying is that, to me anyway, we're starting with two Lazaruses from two separate universes who, like I said, under no normal circumstances would ever be aware of the other's existence. Right. And the thing that drives evil Lazarus to be evil Lazarus is just the knowledge of the existence of another Lazarus.
Let us back up 1 second. First of all, I don't think we can call him evil Lazarus. This is sort of the same. This is the same thing that we did in The Enemy Within. In fact, the more rambunctious Lazarus, and that's the most I'll give him here, the most rambunctious Lazarus is not evil. He saves Kirk's life.
Yeah.
And it's not like he wanted to kill Kirk, but he actually says that. Kirk says when he's in sickbay, after Lazarus has fallen down for like the 9th time, right. He says to him, I want to thank you for saving my life. And Alt Lazarus, or rambunctious Lazarus, says, why wouldn't I? Well, there's no reason that he wouldn't. I mean, because he's not evil. Yeah. He is, however, driven by this other, him?
He's mad.
Yes. You mean angry?
Yes. Well, and a little off center.
Sure. Although, I mean, how would you react? Let's say you could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that there's another you somewhere. Would it make you mental?
I would avoid that person at parties. I would try not to book the same flight with that person.
Sure.
I don't know that I would go totally crazy. I probably would be friends with that person on Facebook, but I wouldn't really check in on his profile that often.
Really?
Yeah.
See, because I'll bet you would totally check to make sure he's not going to better parties than you are.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, okay. That would make me a little... No, I would have to block that. I would have to hide that person. Yeah,
you don't want to upset yourself by, completely disregarding the friend request.
No, you would have to accept the friend request, but you would have to, let them go. What about you, Ken?
Dude, I don't even like other people named Ken, okay? It is something, honestly, that I have to get over. It's weird. And I've had friends who are named Ken, but it took me a while because, my name's Ken. And yours, shouldn't be, as far as I'm concerned. So if there's a whole other me, I don't know. I mean, it might be kind of fun. It depends. It depends on what kind of mood I'm in. I've often wondered about that, though. I think it has a lot to do with personality type, right? It's weird to think that there are a number of things, like you called him Evil Lazarus earlier, and I know we've stepped back from that now.
It's shorthand for this episode.
Okay, yeah. but there is a problem, though. This is like the whole thing when we talk about carbon chauvinism as well. There's an assumption that our universe is the right universe. I was thinking about Tomorrow is Yesterday as well. Mm-hmm. The assumption was, well, we have to put everything back to rights. Otherwise, things don't go right because we know how things go. Well, no, you knew how things went. You don't necessarily know how things go at this point. So when they're discussing the possibility of an alternate universe, they can't even stick with calling it an alternate or parallel universe. Kirk immediately has to go into, so there's their negative universe and our positive universe. Really? Right. Well, let's talk to the other Kirk that's in the other Enterprise in the other universe and ask him which one is the negative universe or the positive universe. Now, maybe it's just about keeping your your audience with some kind of understanding, because Serene Lazarus, non-head wound Lazarus, had no problem saying, no, what we have here is antimatter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? Because I would think that they would call that matter in his universe.
Exactly.
And that, he would call what we have in our universe antimatter, and then we could fight about that instead of, whether or not those two crazy kids should get together.
Well, the whole decision that Kirk makes is based on smooth-talking, non-head wound Lazarus. And it's a good thing that he was right. I mean, like you said, it could have just been, I was talking to the wrong guy.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing that plan worked out.
Yeah.
Because they really didn't have much to go on otherwise. And by the way, if positive Kirk, our Kirk in our universe of this show, just shows up in the antimatter universe, doesn't any congregation of matter and antimatter just sort of start to wipe itself out? Because Lazarus and Alt Lazarus keep kind of bumping into each other, and they're actually fighting in this corridor. But I guess that's sort of a safe zone where they can do that.
That is a safe zone where they can do that, right? That exists outside of any other universe. Here's the question I thought you were going to ask. Mm-hmm. When Kirk goes to the other universe, does Kirk with a goatee just stumble out?
He might.
Onto the unnamed planet for just a few minutes with everybody kind of standing around awkwardly going, you're not supposed to be here for a little while.
Right. I think so. Here's the thing. So Lazarus, to use the terms good or evil, good or bad, whatever, it is just purely a point of view. And that's what Lazarus actually says. Non-head wound Lazarus says that to Kirk. Mm-hmm. Well, it just depends on the point of view that you have. I agree, but head wound Lazarus is totally fine with the idea of destroying the universe. That seems a little less than a point of view and more self-destructive. In fact, he's going to destroy everything.
Well, he is.
So that seems like a pretty easy choice. You just have to assume that your choice is right.
Well, he may not. That's an interesting thing, because you just said, well, he was talking to smooth-talking Lazarus, and that's why you went ahead with that. Maybe other Lazarus has this other idea that it's not going to destroy the galaxy, or the universe for that matter. Now, Spock has already indicated to us that he thinks that that's what would happen too. So we are actually sort of given to understand that what smooth-talking Lazarus is saying is probably right, because Spock's already been afraid that that was going to happen. In fact, Spock, who every now and then we think is not cool killing people, even though, secretly he really has no problem killing people, he says, they should either contain or possibly destroy both of the Lazari. Now, I find it interesting that he thought that would work.
Yeah, right.
Because, you've got the problem of, if you kill one, does the other one automatically die? Or do you have to make sure that you kill them both precisely at the same time? And is that not going to fold the universe in on itself as well? No, you're right. Best to leave them out of any universe from now on.
Well, and leave them out of any universe, but leave them in this corridor where they will fight for eternity.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Well, I don't buy it. I don't.
You would think at some point they might just go, yeah, you know what?
Yeah, come on, time out. Time out.
Why are we fighting? When I was a boy, I had a ball. Oh, wow. When I was a boy, I had a ball. Hey, let's have a ball. And then they could not fight anymore. They could just, they could be friends. Yeah.
And why eternity? I mean, these both are beings with physical bodies. Now, granted, that it's sure the rules of the corridor are a little bit different, but they just sort of assume that it's eternity.
Right.
Like, oh, yeah, anything goes on there is eternity. So, well, okay, so say you. But we have nothing to base that on.
It doesn't really matter. I mean, once they wink out, they wink out. So it really, to us, it does not matter anymore. And you can sit there and you can say, as if it's profound, what of Lazarus?
See, exactly.
But it doesn't really matter.
You say that it doesn't matter, because to me it doesn't matter.
Well, it matters to Lazarus and Lazarus, but
Yeah, but it's Lazarus versus the entire universe, if we buy the premise of this show. To me, that seems like a pretty easy sacrifice to understand.
Lazarus may fall down a lot, and let's be clear, he does. Can he hold up the alternative factor?
I can't decide if you take glee in answering the questions this week. I know we were sort of sad when we got to answer the questions about Miri, and yet I sort of feel like you almost feel like this episode has it coming. Yeah. We ask questions every week, messages, morals, meaning, does the episode stand the test of time, all that stuff. And we're just going to let John go. John, does this episode stand up? Does it hold up as far as you're concerned from a production standpoint?
Ken, let me... Okay, all right, production standpoint? All right, let's look at the production here. We've seen some interesting, some effective, some not very effective production choices on Star Trek. Let's look at the Horta. Horta is, maybe a not too great looking effect by today's standards, but stuck into a really great episode full of great ideas to ponder and a truly humanistic message at the core. So you can forgive a lot of that. But I tell you what I can't forgive in the alternative factor, aside from the blurry shots and the wind. There's a lot of wind on Lazarus's planet, and the fighting in a corridor, which again is literally a corridor. Mm-hmm. What I can't forgive is maybe one of the worst lines of dialogue yet in Star Trek. And I quote, "I call it an alternative warp, sort of a negative magnetic corridor where the two parallel universes meet, sort of a safety valve that keeps eternity from blowing up." Okay, I'm here to tell you that not even a Barrymore could save that crap.
Ah, dude. All right, so your answer is maybe?
You know what I'm going to do after we're done with the show today? I'm going to go watch Miri, and I'm going to love every minute of it.
All right, that's fine. Understand, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, this episode only holds up in comparison to Miri. This episode does not work. And there is a lot here that I would love to see work in this episode, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. We recap the story. Well, let's see. There are 4 acts, and it feels like we recap the story like 6 times.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, at least twice I know Kirk says, all right, let's go over it again.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because there was concern that there would be confusion because we're going back and forth and it's the same guy, but it's a different guy, but we don't want to reveal that yet, but we have to make sure that people are coming along, or if it was just padding. I mean, this 48 minutes feels like 67 easily. And that makes me sad because, honestly, I know you're bagging on the actor who is not John Drew Barrymore, but I didn't think he was terrible. I mean, we've seen some overacting on Star Trek, and this is certainly some overacting. I mean, he was a fairly magnetic dude. Yeah. I was kind of okay with him. I really do think they were trying something too with the visual cues. It just sadly, it just did not work.
And I don't think that Robert Brown is terrible as an actor. And I didn't mention his name earlier. My bad. But yeah, he's not a bad actor. That's not totally the problem here. The problem is that a show lives or dies because of the script, first and foremost.
Yeah.
And the script here is a colossal mess. You start out with an interesting idea. Okay, parallel universe. What can we do with that?
Yeah.
And it just unravels from there.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. I mean, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. I mean, and even if you take the whole, well, we're doing the same message again. You know, if you need one, I mean, the yin-yang message, the good-bad message, which I know you have a hard time getting to in this episode. Mm-hmm. Even if the message holds up, and I guess you could, I mean, if we said that it holds up in Enemy Within, then you have to assume that it holds up here as well. That's just not enough to deliver it.
Yeah, I don't. We're kind of condensing those questions here. What's the message, and does it hold up? And I am having a harder time getting to that message here than I did with The Enemy Within.
Well, it's not as obvious in this episode as it is in The Enemy Within. I mean, understand we're talking about 2 things that have to fight each other forever. Yin and Yang don't actually fight each other forever; they sort of coexist. Right. In The Enemy Within, Logie Kirk literally hugged Alt Kirk. I mean, you definitely have them embracing. I mean, this is a different thing. You have them battling, but this is, I mean, you could almost tie this in a tiny bit if you wanted to A Taste of Armageddon, where they're saying that they have this horrible thing about themselves that they hate. They have this horrible thing about themselves that they hate. They hate the fact that they're killers. So what they're going to do is instead just go calmly into killing themselves, because if they don't do that, then they end up becoming these bloodthirsty, ravaging, horrible things that make war on their neighbors. And so instead, what Kirk says they have to do is fight that. And they only have to decide that they're going to fight it for today. And then, tomorrow is today, and then they have to decide that again. So, I mean, the idea of the constant battle between good and evil, between parts of yourself that you like and parts of yourself that you don't like, I mean, that feels to me like it's happening here. It's a lot more subtle.
I would take subtle a step further, and I would say that to me it feels very inconsequential, because, again, that's something happening elsewhere in this corridor that has now no bearing on our universe or the other universe.
Well, except it's what makes the universe go.
Well, the core doesn't make the universe go. The corridor is just a convenient way to get from one to the other, but we've already destroyed the entry point to get from one to the other.
No, but the fact of the existence of both of these things is what makes the universe go. If you take one of these things out, the whole universe gets destroyed. So what makes the whole universe go is the constant back and forth between the more rational and the more sanguine.
Right. Except
you're not there.
I don't buy it.
You would actually rather watch Miri again than watch this.
Here's the thing, Ken. I will help. I think I know where we're going with this, and I will help crystallize the thoughts on this episode, quoting the great song lyrics of the Facts of Life theme song. You take the good, you take the bad, take them both. There you have the facts of life.
I have no idea what you're doing now.
I'm just trying to do like Spock does and add a little poetry to it.
Really? But what
really.
of different strokes?
what
of different strokes?
Different strokes.
Yeah. All right. So here's my question. Did you people theoretically still listening at this point feel the same way that we did about the alternative factor? Either one of us, because, we're doing that Siskel and Ebert thing where, well, no, we're not really, because we both agree the episode doesn't work. It's just you really think the episode doesn't work. We're curious what you think about the episode. So please do us a favor. Reach out and touch us. Nothing kinky. Well, maybe a little kinky. Facebook, Skype, and Twitter at the handle MissionLogPod. Or, of course, you can call us 323-522-5641. And now a bit less staccato, 323-522-5641. You can email us, missionlog@roddenberry.com. And don't forget to check out our webpage, missionlogpodcast.com. Remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log.
Speaking of upcoming episodes, Ken, next week is such sweet relief. It is redemption for doing the alternative factor. I cannot wait. The classic City on the Edge of Forever.
Some of the music for the Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. It looks like we've survived another episode, but what of next week? What of next week? End transmission.
Now leaving Nerdist.com.